We have an agenda that has been prepared. It is going to be projected on the screen. If you want a hard copy, you can see our city clerk, Ms. Chelsea Seaman. She'll make sure you get a hard copy so you can follow along. At this time, I'd like to officially call this meeting to order. We have the agenda, as I said, prepared. Council members, what is your pleasure with the agenda?
Move to approve.
Properly moved and seconded that we approve the agenda. Any unreadiness? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposers, nay. Public hearing. This is our second hearing for 25R-09, which is the intent to opt out, and I underscore the word intent to opt out of the floating homestead exemption, House Bill 581, presented by our city manager, Mr. Ray Gibson.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I've tweaked the presentation a bit, so this morning I'm just going to talk briefly about the benefits and drawbacks of House Bill 581. I think there's some confusion sometimes when you put all the numbers up there because there are different tax levels that people have, so to focus on one may not be consistent with what people actually have on their tax bill. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, like I said, talk about the benefits and drawbacks, so hopefully that'll clarify some of the issues that we've been discussing over the last couple months. So once again, quickly, why we're doing this: skyrocketing assessments in parts of Metro Atlanta which have raised people's property taxes. The House and the Senate supported the bill, which moved to a referendum, which was supported by the statewide 63 to 37%, and within Fayette County 57 to 43%, with an 83% turnout, which is a great turnout. So let's talk about the benefits quickly. So the homeowners get some relief on skyrocketing assessments with a 3% cap on assessments, which is the main purpose of the floating homestead exemption. It increases transparency and fairness in property tax assessments. Now, some may say that's not true, but that was the intent of this particular bill. And the floating homestead exemption rewards homeowners, especially those that reside in the community for a long period of time. And yesterday when I discussed in the public hearing about buying a home in 2025, I live in that home for 10 years, and the person who comes and lives next door to me, they just buy in 2035, they're paying more taxes on their home than I am, having lived there for 10 years and have that 3% cap for 10 years. The bill does not apply to the non-homestead properties that include non-homestead residential, commercial, and industrial, and allows the option of an additional 1-cent sales tax, the FLOST, if approved through a voter referendum. That could help jurisdictions with revenue losses. Once again, that would have to go through the referendum, and it may not be supported. So there's no guarantee that you can collect those revenues. All right, let's talk a bit about the drawbacks. Once a jurisdiction is in, there's no opting out unless new legislation is passed down the road. And there may be some hopes that that could possibly happen with all the issues that we've been having in this particular bill. It will slow the rate at which the city's tax digest grows, ultimately impacting revenue growth. Well, like I said, like Mike mentioned yesterday as well in the public hearing, is we're pretty good financially. We're in a pretty good financial situation over the next 5 to 10 years. And we create like property tax inequities, like we've talked a lot about that. It requires more work from the county tax assessor's office to track the new exemption, which is a concern to us in terms of increased costs if we were to opt out of this particular legislation. And multiple exemptions can lead to public confusion. So the more exemptions, we were talking to some people after the meeting yesterday, and they have all these exemptions. I'm like, some of them, a military disability benefit. This really wouldn't really benefit them in this particular, because they have such high exemptions already. May increase the city's cost of tax collection, like I just mentioned, and the city can still raise the millage rate to collect revenue shortfall. So that's what wasn't talked a lot about in this bill. If we have shortfalls and we need to provide the services and keep providing the services that we've been providing, especially public safety, we would have to raise the millage rate. But like I've mentioned numerous times, we've been very conservative with our budgeting process, and we feel that we're pretty good, as well as support from economic development initiatives that are currently happening in the city. And then, last one is, we don't know if we opt out of this, if next year or within the next couple of years, the local legislative delegation doesn't come back to us and say, we're going to force a cap on the city for the homestead exemption. So that's a possibility. I don't think it would happen, but it's always that possibility. But I hope some of the confusion will be discussed at the legislature with this particular bill. Maybe not this year, but next year. And as I mentioned yesterday, House Bill 92 came through the Senate yesterday, waiting for governor's sign off, and we have to really look at that particular bill as well. And this evening I'll provide council with a staff recommendation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gilbert. Gibson, excuse me, I apologize. One of those mornings this morning, Mr. Gibson. This time I'll ask the council members, do you have any questions for Mr. Gibson? This is a public hearing item. If there are any citizens who wish to come and address this particular item on the agenda, please do so. Come up and give us your name, your address, and you have 3 minutes if you wish to make any comments or questions.
Morning.
Good morning.
My name is Jill Lalakata. I live at 170 Kent Drive.
Yes, ma'am. Could you push that? Right.
Sorry, short people. I recommend we opt out. What I heard is we are good financially for the next 10 years, which I believe that is because you have the flexibility to do that. If we do nothing, it means we opt in, but it sounds like we will lose some of our flexibility. And then we are stuck, because once you opt in, you're in. So let's opt out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I need to sign that?
Yes, please sign in. Good morning.
Good morning to
Good to see you
you. I
last
feel
night.
fortunate. I feel like I get 9 minutes in 2 days to talk to you. So good morning. I'm glad to be here again. I'm trying not to repeat things I've said before, so I'll try to address and get into more details on some other issues so that it doesn't become redundant for you. I want to focus on things that were said yesterday in the presentation, particularly from your staff. And I want to get clarification and understand where those are coming from. One of the statements that's been made a couple times is that taxes are not disappearing. Property taxes are just being shifted to non-homestead options. I don't understand the fairness of that. Talked about loyalty to long-term residents, that loyalty coming at the detriment of short-term residents, or at the detriment of those who want to move here, or those that don't get that credit. So I don't see that as a benefit to the community by rewarding the loyalty of those who live here. So I'm confused about that statement. Probably even more confusing is the staff said that we're looking forward to getting through this process so that we can fully understand the options for the community and for the state. I had to go back and hear the tape last night to believe that was said. So what the recommendation is, so let's opt in, and then we'll figure it out. We don't know what the answer is today, but we hope that at some point we get clarity on it, 581. But until we do, let's go ahead and proceed with 581, because it's the right thing to do, I guess. The FLOST. It was mentioned yesterday the support for the FLOST from this jurisdiction and others. I haven't heard that. I want to know where that's from. I don't think there is support for a FLOST. It is a regressive sales tax, and I'm hoping that you're not supporting that. I'm actually hoping this whole 581 issue is not about the FLOST and just kind of on the sideline. And the issue is, there were some misleading things yesterday, just to clarify, and I think some of that was addressed this morning in the presentation. It was said in the comments that the cost for the county to deal with multiple type of property tax assessments could cost $200,000 or $300,000. First time I heard that number, I don't know where that came from. Is that a negotiated number? Is that coming from the county? Or is that one of the fear tactics that were being proposed to promote 581, that if you opt in, or if you opt out, I'm sorry, that it's going to cost you money from the county to deal with this differential property tax assessment? That may be true. I don't know what the number is. I just question the $200,000 to $300,000 number as being brought to you in a public session as being kind of the best guess or the fact. There's some history here with Councilmember Rich Hoffman dealing with the millage rate. I'm not aware of. There was some kind of humor going on about I'm not going to, that you would allow a decrease in the millage rate. I'm sure what staff meant to say was that Councilmember Hoffman is one vote of all of you and does not control whether or not millage rates go up or down, and that you should look at the millage rate and set that based on needs, not based on some theoretical starting point. If you're doing well in revenue because of other economic development, great. Look at the millage rate. See if there is an option to reduce it so that you can still have the same services but not charge the residents as much money. Then there's this issue about you could be forced, another fear-mongering thing, I believe. You could be forced by the legislature to opt out anyway. Put yourself in their shoes in 2026, a critical election year, and they're going to vote to force you to opt out in that season after they've already given you the option to opt out in 581, after they're already given you the option to extend your discussions about opting out to give you more chance to do so. To suggest that the legislature is going to turn around and could force you to opt out just doesn't make realistic sense to me. And so putting it out there kind of tends to put this cloud over things to see what is really happening here with the legislature. Staff may have been asked last night to do, so I can't blame them for that, but I think it's inappropriate for staff to make a recommendation before the end of the public hearings. The purpose of these hearings is to hear what people have to say. And for staff to come out in the middle or the beginning of that process and say, we recommend opting out, staying in, doesn't seem fair to those that are coming to talk to you about that, to hear those issues and then make a recommendation. So in conclusion, I think there's some questions I'd like to see answered tonight, and I'm glad that there is a report coming talking from the staff as far as their recommendations. Staff has heard, quote, there's a lot of support for it as far as staying in 581. I'm not sure where that's coming from. That should be clarified. Support from other cities, which was mentioned, or support from where. Staff said that they've heard that from the other cities, it's best to opt in. Well, I hope you're not taking your direction from other cities or from the state. You're making decisions based on what's best for Fayetteville. Staff needs to clarify this issue about FLOST, because I don't want that to all of a sudden to raise its ugly head again in the future, because I believe you're not into FLOST, but I want to ensure that's not the reason for the support. And finally, I think tonight we not only need the background, but staff should come with a list of why. Why are you recommending to stay in? Based on what? Based on what information? Based on the benefits that you talk about, or the different problems with 581? But just to be clear so that we in the public can respond to it. Your recommendation is to stay in. That's the staff's recommendation. Why? That's all I'm asking. Why is that recommendation? What are the facts behind that? Thank you. Thank you for your time. I really do appreciate you doing these. Hopefully it will make a difference, and hopefully you will continue down the process to opt out.
If I can answer your comment about
Sure.
the millage rate, I have been an opponent of not lowering it because it's such a small amount of money, and I'm an ex-business person, and if I don't know about like you, but how you have some extra money in your account at home, and something breaks. This is my attitude about it. We as a city have so much infrastructure that's old. Giving you back $16 or $20 or $30 a year isn't going to help cover that kind of expense. That's my attitude towards it as a business person. The first year that came up, our total extra money was $117,000. You know, so it's not a lot of money when you say roll back or roll up, because it's not. But that's the way, as a business person, I look down the road. What do we have to fix? What do we have to pay for? And in this city, and we have a lot.
Well, and I support that. There was kind of a joke going on about you in particular were strong on this issue.
Well, that's because I have been one
No,
of
I
the
understand.
proponents of that, because I really feel like I said, I've in business for 44 years, and every time I thought I had a little extra money in the bank account, a piece of equipment would break, or something else would happen, or health insurance would go up. And so, you know, I always believe in holding that little nest egg back for the future. House Bill 581 limits us to be able to do some of that, and and actually I feel like it was a twofold bill. This is my interpretation. It was, I think the original intent was to try to keep elderly people that are on a fixed income from being forced out of their homes because of rising taxes. And if you look at that chart we put up last night, 3 years, that wasn't a big issue. It was the last 3 years, especially the last 2 years, we had double-digit raises in the tax digest. Why is that? What did they use as a rule to make those adjustments that much higher than they were the previous 3 or 4 or 5 years before that? That's my question and my understanding. Why did that happen? Secondly, I think that we as a council have done everything we can to try to keep everybody's taxes at a reasonable amount. And by offsetting that with our economic development that we've done, the data center, Trilith, the town of Trilith, the movie industry, and a lot of other things that are going on, even the Walton apartments that people don't really like the word apartment, they were paying $30,000 a year in tax at the most on the taxes on that 30 acres. And I'm sure our tax bill now is what we get in taxes is a lot more. So that's the kind of thing that I feel we have to balance. So yes, I'm a business person and I look at all of those things directly, but it's a joke between Ray Gibson and I anyhow. But
Yeah, no, that's fine, and we in this, you know, the people in the city appreciate the fact that we're in good financial position. And don't get me wrong, the fact that having money in the bank to deal with the unforeseen is a good issue, and we applaud that. As you mentioned, whether or not you're going to save 10 or 15 bucks to go through the process, is that for the greater good or not as far as the millage rate? Exact same argument for 581. You know, maybe it was you'd like it to be intended to help seniors. It wasn't written that way. It didn't come out that way. It was never sold that way. It'd be great if that happened, but the relative difference of what's being cut doesn't really justify opting in for 581.
Well, thank you so much. You made some valid points, and I know there were several that were enumerated, and I don't know if I would want to ask the staff to try to answer every one of them. Let me ask this, Ray, would it be easier if we just got the questions that you had, and if you can give him to him in a written format, so you have them written down and we can be prepared, and I'm sure you'll be at tonight's meeting to hear the final decision.
I just clarify a couple?
Sure, sure.
yeah, I think they ought to be verbal at this meeting.
So first of all, the flossed. I made that clear last night. We weren't talking about that because we weren't in support of that. So that was one of the comments that was made. The tax burden being shifted to non-homestead properties is a true fact, right? Their taxes are going to continue to go up while the other was residential, the homestead exemption, the floating homestead is capped. So now you see your commercial and industrial uses bearing some of the more of the burden of the tax. And I want Mike to come up, and we talked about that. We want to make sure we clarify for you the tax collections issue, the numbers, so Mike can.
There's a state law that says that a tax commissioner can charge up to 2% of collections for your taxes that they collect. Well, I think in 2024 our taxes are $9,880,000. Round that to 10 million. 2% of 10 million is $200,000, and that is the estimate that we are looking at, $200,000.
Thank you.
And also, if there's any additional cost to the tax assessor or tax commissioner based on what the city of Fayetteville decides to do, there is a chance that they would also ask us to participate in purchase of new software to be able to handle the issues that we may generate by opting out.
So I might make it easier as far as the questions. We need to deal with what is and what the facts are. 200,000 may be the limit of what you can be assessed for doing the calculations, not 300,000 that was mentioned yesterday. 200,000 is not a minimum, it's what can be assessed. Now there's new equipment that we hear about, that the county may ask you to buy new software equipment for them. So we keep hearing new things about the impacts of opting out to suggest that opting out is a bad idea. As far as the written questions, it's really pretty simple. What are your reasons for recommending opting in? Just tell us what your reasons are.
I think the reasons are pretty simple. The people voted for it.
And I hear that. That's the first time that's come up in the last couple of meetings. And I was going to wait to talk about that maybe tonight. Everybody here acknowledges that the voters didn't know what they were voting for.
Totally.
Everybody here acknowledges that the city didn't know what was in the bill until after they got into it. But we're going to hide behind the fact that because there was a vote, we're going to go ahead and proceed with this issue. Even though you have been given options to address the issue that the voters are asking for, and that means lower my property tax. You can do that. You don't have to go into 581 to do that. You can create your own locally driven homestead exemption to do the exact same thing, but keep local control. So you can respond to the voters and saying, we heard you, you want to pay less money. Okay, we're going to do that, but we're going to manage it, not the city. You have been told that you could manage that through the millage rate. That if indeed you had to, or if you wanted to, that you could offset the cost of the reduction in the property tax through a millage rate. Does that meet the intent of the voters who wanted their property, wanted their reduced fee? So you're going to not charge me property tax, but you're going to charge me over here. That's not responsive to the intent of the voters either. So if your issue is being responsive to the voters, give them what they want. Give them a reduction in their property tax that they asked for, but do it locally controlled. Don't do it through the state process.
May I say that
That would have to still be a state
Yeah.
process, though.
when I first was elected, the first thing I had to do was vote for a millage increase. Okay, first year in office. But when we developed our 10-year plan and we extended every year to that 10-year, we made a promise that we would not raise our millage rate, or
Correct.
shouldn't have to raise our millage rate during that 10-year period. And our goal was down the road, we might be able to lower it if through good management and
Sure.
the way things went. So that's always been our intent, not necessarily to stick with it or not stick with it, but what is, the school board, for instance, was given this 3% cap 4 years ago? 4 years ago, and you see what they're saying about having to operate and having shortfalls and so
Right, sir.
on. It does create problems, absolutely.
Yeah,
And we understand that, and I'll be honest with you, when we first looked at the bill, I was, let's opt in, that's what the voters recommended. And after we had our first town hall meeting and everybody spoke, you in particular, we decided that maybe we ought to hold the opt-out meetings to discuss and listen to everybody and see where we were. And that's what you're seeing now.
And so I applaud the fiscal responsibility. I really do. And understanding that there's a state approval process for even a generally locally mandated or locally provided exemption. But I want to be clear that you have options to provide what the voters wanted. That option can be locally driven rather than state driven and meet the same criteria and the same desire of the property owners. You can stand tall and say, we heard you, and we're going to cut your property taxes the same as HB 581, but we're going to do it with our control process. So easy for tonight, no written questions necessary. Give us the reasons why you recommend staying in.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we can do that.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right?
Morning. Excuse me. My name is Susan Sampson. I lived in California when Proposition 13 passed in 1978. Prop 13 created a cap on property taxes, and it enforces restrictions on state and local governments on how they can raise revenues. I realize 581 does not have those precise restrictions, but it did really restrict property tax. It decreased, okay, so there's some things that over the many years that it's been in effect, that they have been following and studying. First of all, it decreased school funding. Just real quickly, per capita school revenues generated from local property tax declined by 52%. Excuse me. California plunged from 5th in per student funding to 47th in the nation in a few short years. It caused housing scarcity because people were not inclined to move. And I know here in Fayette County, we really want to increase the number of young people who can come in and live here. If you've got people staying in their houses forever and ever, you're not going to have housing for young people unless you build more apartments, right? And I know that there's some issues with that. There's some issues with affordable housing and creating more affordable housing here. So housing scarcity is a problem. Public services, Proposition 13 limited tax revenues that fund not only schools, but also many other local services. These include fire, police departments, libraries. Libraries were hit incredibly hard. And we've got fantastic libraries here. We'd hate to have our libraries hit by property tax decrease. Parks, other services, 911, etc. It fundamentally altered how public services are financed and delivered. Many services once funded through general taxes are now partially or completely paid for by user fees or benefit assessments, shifting the burden of financing public services away from the public at large. And something you just touched on, fiscalization of land use. Instead of building houses, it makes a whole lot more sense to build big box stores and tax revenue generating commercial businesses, right? I know that there's some issues here in the county with that. There are a lot of people who are saying, hey, my county's changing a whole lot. So fiscalization of tax use is a big thing, I think, for this county, this city. And Prop 13 has required arcane finance techniques and continuous amendments to the laws in order to get necessary services, which is complex, time-consuming, difficult for voters to understand, and a lot of times regressive. So I encourage opting out. I hope that the city opts out, and I hope that the county opts out. I know that right here we're talking about the city, but I do encourage opting out of HB 581.
Well, just encourage you to communicate with your county officials
I
with
will do
regards
that.
to their issues.
Great.
If
Thank you
are
very
sitting
much. I will.
Listen, we've allowed the comments to go beyond the normal 3 minutes because we really believe that you have something pertinent and relevant to say to educate your perspective to the council, and we really appreciate your comments. Are there any other citizens who wish to come forward? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to move on from this hearing on this item. This is the second hearing. The third will be tonight at 6:00 p.m. We'd like to move on to new business. These are voting items. Resolution 25R-13, film permit fees and guidelines, presented by our Economic Development Coordinator, Ms. Melody Green.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Good morning.
So this morning, staff would like to propose an update to our film permit applications, specifically our guidelines and fees. So, as you know, there's been an influx of filming that has been taking place in the city. So, now is a good time for us to update our application to make it a more seamless process for staff and our film partners. The proposed changes that we are recommending is indemnification and hold harmless agreements being added to our application, a notification process to our neighbors for road closures, partial and full, giving them enough time to make those accommodations, and then also recommending that City Council approve any requests for closures of our parks and facilities, and then lastly, adding an online payment portal for those fees to be received. So also, moving on to the bottom half of that, we evaluated what some of our neighboring cities were doing as far as their rates for those film applications, and we wanted to continue to be business friendly and kind of targeted the bottom end of that spectrum on charging a $100 application fee. There's also a recommended $100 rep fee, so when it's less than 2 weeks, give enough time for Public Works and police to coordinate for those road closures and notice for those neighbors. To use city parks and facilities, we're recommending a $150 a day fee. You can move to the next. Thank you. And then continuing on policy or procedure for using city parks and facilities. So if there's no request for a full park closure, it'll be on staff to review the application and make a recommendation which is best for the city. If a film partner is looking to have a full closure, we would like to bring that to City Council for approval on a case-by-case basis, based on the impact of the public, residents, and businesses. So those are the updates that we are recommending.
Well, let me say that I think that this is definitely timely. We needed to get ahead of our field permitting and make sure as we hopefully anticipate more requests for permitting will come to the city, and we need to make those adjustments. And so let me commend you all for thinking ahead and making sure that we adjust as necessary. Any other comments from the city council? Okay. What is your-
For clarification, can you go back? I think I can do this. This application fee is $100, and if they do a rush, it's an additional $100.
It's an additional $100.
Thing to do now. Put that down.
Anything else from council?
What is the fee? What is the fee amount now?
We are currently not charging any fees to film in the city.
Any other questions from council? Are there any questions from the citizens on this item? Hearing none. Council members, what is your pleasure with 25R-13?
Move to approve.
Second.
Properly moved in second. Any unreadiness? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposers, nay. 25R-14, City Center Park Events Policy and Fee Schedule, presented by our Main Street and Program Events Manager, Ms. Michelle Holmes.
Good morning, Mayor Council.
Good morning, Michelle.
We're here to present, I'm here to staff to recommend a City Center Park event policy fees and application. Currently, we do not have one, and we get requests a lot asking to use the park. So what we'd like to do is propose, I'm sorry. Propose this. Right now, we only allow Main Street sponsored events or that's it, or obviously Main Street events. We'd like to propose changes to organized events, which would allow Main Street businesses that are in the district, if they're in good standing, their business license and liquor license, all those are in good standing, and also sponsored events for nonprofit, civic, or government entities. The rental fee proposed is the application processing fee, which would be $50. A refundable deposit would be $150 we would hold until after the event. We have 3 different classes, 50, then 50 to 100, and 100 to 500. And obviously, a liability waiver is required. We do have a similar policy for the rental of the gazebo that we use, and as far as the application. But this policy is also created to ensure that the decisions regarding approval or denial for the use of the city center park are considered upon an open, inclusive, and transparent method based on uniform criteria.
How would you count the people?
So
I mean, if
it
I
is
was-
a very,
If I was gonna use the park, I'd tell you I only have 50 people and pay $75, and I could have 200 there and save the $300.
I know.
You see what I'm saying? That's the only question I have on that.
And that's why we are limiting it to basically churches. It is a very hard policy. We have meetings with our event committee. We bring them in. It's not just something that we just agree on. We have to bring them in, and they have to get good standing. So, yeah.
I'm just wanting to question the classification organized events for approved City of Fayetteville business entities in good standing. Quantify or clarify that for me.
As far as, so basically what that means is that it would only limit to Main Street businesses in the Main Street district rather than the whole city. And as far as good standing, we would check with Phyllis and make sure that their business license, alcohol license, everything is good and paid up.
Are you saying now, for instance, the Lime Creek has their cornhole tournaments and stuff, are they paying a fee now for that?
Yes, we would require everybody. We do, even if it's a Main Street sponsored event. Currently, we don't charge any for any of the sponsored events.
And have you discussed this with any of the businesses
No.
like them to see what their feedback would be on it?
Yeah.
Might be in best interest to have that conversation, just to get a sense of how they feel about it. As opposed to putting this forth and getting it approved, and then all of a sudden, we don't have people who want to do activities because they don't want to pay the fee.
And I agree. Yes, I agree.
Council members, anything else? Are there any questions from any of the citizens on this? I would recommend that we table this item until you have the opportunity to talk to some of the Main Street businesses, just to get a sense of how they feel about it. And then to come back and present it once you've had conversation.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm not opposed to a fee, but
Neither am I.
I'm just saying, if we just approve this, and the next time they have a tournament and we have to say you have to pay, we might get some ill will out of it if they didn't know about it.
Move to table it then.
Okay.
I move the table.
Yeah, I move the
Oh,
table.
did you move the table?
I move the table, sorry.
Okay, we'll put it back.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we table this item. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Well thought out, Michelle, but we just want to make sure we don't, alienate our small business without telling them. Okay. All right. Moving on to consent agenda items, ladies and gentlemen. 25R12, Professional Services Agreement with Comprehensive Program Services, Inc. for Program Management Services. 25R-15, supporting the submission of a TAP application request funding for the design and construction of a portion of the High Priority Trail through GDOT's Transportation Alternative Program. And 25R-16, supporting Fayette County submission of a TAP application requesting funding for the design and construction of a multi-use path connecting Sandy Creek Road to Eastern Road through GDOT's Transportation Alternative Program. Council members, what is your pleasure with this consent agenda items?
Move to approve consent agenda items 25R12, 25R15, 25R16.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded for the consent agenda items noted. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, the same. City manager, anything to report? Comments?
No, sir.
Okay. Council members, anything? No? Okay. Are there any citizens who wish to bring forth anything? It's not on agenda, but we always allow if there are any citizens who wish to address the council. even at a work session. Hearing and seeing none, I think our business is done here until this evening. I will entertain a motion that we adjourn this work session. Properly moving second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposers, nay. Thank you, ladies. Day.